Dr. Eleanor Reynolds closed Robert Carter's file and looked at Emily with an expression she hadn't seen in 7 years of consultations. Curiosity. The neurologist had spent 22 years treating patients with Alzheimer's. She'd seen hundreds of cases, thousands of brain scans, files that always ended the same way. Progressive decline, with no exceptions. But this case was different. Dr. Reynolds removed her glasses and placed them on the desk. Her voice was careful, almost distrustful. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "I need to ask you a question." Emily Carter, 58 years old, CEO of a chain of 12 boutique hotels, straightened her back in the leather chair. She was used to executive meetings, to million-dollar decisions, to international contracts, but the doctor's gaze, it unsettled her. "Please," Emily replied. The doctor swiveled her laptop toward her. On the screen was a graph. Brain waves. Blues, reds, yellow. Emily didn't understand any of it, but she did understand graphs, numbers, trends, and what she was seeing, it made no sense. "Who is cooking in your house?" Emily blinked. "Excuse me?" "In the last 3 months," the doctor said, pointing to the screen, "Robert has shown neuronal activity that I don't see in stage 6 Alzheimer's patients. Something is stimulating his olfactory memory, strongly." Emily felt a knot in her stomach. Neuronal activity? Robert hadn't recognized anyone in 4 years, not even her. Her husband, the love of her life, the man who had looked her in the eyes in Paris 30 years ago and told her they would build a life together. Now, he didn't even know her name. "I don't cook," Emily said. Her voice sounded small, almost ashamed. "I don't have time." The doctor nodded slowly. "And your housekeeper?" Emily frowned. "Maria, she just cleans." "Doctor." Reynolds opened a second window on the laptop. Data, dates, times. "These are Robert's brainwaves over the last 12 weeks. Do you see these spikes?" Emily leaned forward. There were spikes. Many, like small mountains on an electrocardiogram. "They occur every day," the doctor continued, "always at the same time. 6:47 p.m., dinner time." Emily stopped breathing. "If you want to know how this story ends, stick around until the end." Because what Emily discovered when she got home that night at 6:47 p.m., it changed everything she thought she knew about love and about who really knew her husband. Let's rewind 8 months. Emily Carter had just fired Robert's 5th caregiver in 2 years. Not because they were bad, not because they didn't do their jobs, but because Emily couldn't stand seeing the pity in their eyes every time they entered the room where Robert spent his days, sitting in a chair. looking out the window, seeing nothing. Emily needed someone who wouldn't look at him with pity. She needed someone who would simply be there. Maria Rodriguez arrived on a Tuesday morning, 48 years old, hair pulled back in a braid, impeccable blue uniform, steady hands. She didn't ask questions, didn't look surprised when she saw Robert. She just nodded and said, "I understand." Emily hired her on the spot. For the first 3 months, Maria was exactly what Emily had asked for: silent, efficient, invisible. She cleaned the house, helped Robert with his meals, took him to the bathroom, changed his clothes, everything the other caregivers had done. But there was something different. Maria wasn't in a hurry. When she fed Robert, she didn't do it mechanically. She talked to him, softly, as if he could understand. When she helped him walk in the garden, she didn't drag him. She walked beside him, describing the flowers, the sky, the birds, as if he were listening. Emily noticed it when she came home. Always late, always exhausted. 20 minutes. That was all the time she spent with Robert each day. 20 minutes in which she took his hand, told him she loved him, and left. Because staying longer, it hurt too much. But there was a detail that Emily didn't notice for months. Every time Emily came home, there was a smell, not a cleaning smell, not disinfectant, a smell of home cooking. Emily assumed Maria was cooking for herself, for her dinner. She didn't care. Maria was allowed to use the kitchen. But that smell, there was something familiar about it, something that Emily couldn't place, until that afternoon at the clinic, when Dr. Reynolds showed her the spikes on Robert's brainwaves. 6:47 p.m. every day. Emily left the clinic and didn't go back to her office. She called her assistant, cancelled all the meetings for the day, and drove straight home. It was 6:20 p.m. when she arrived. Maria didn't know she was coming. Emily parked the car and sat for a moment. The sun was starting to set. The house looked peaceful, as always. But inside, something was happening. Something the doctor had detected on a brainwave graph. Something that occurred every day at 6:47 p.m. Emily took a breath, got out of the car. Opened the front door, and the smell hit her like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just home cooking, it was a specific smell. A smell she hadn't smelled in 30 years. From Italy, from Napa Valley, from a small bistro in Yountville where she and Robert had eaten on their honeymoon. Wild boar ragu, pasta with wild boar sauce, red wine, regional herbs, the dish that Robert had tasted and declared with shining eyes, "This taste is US forever." And now that smell was in her house. Emily walked slowly down the hall. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel the pulse in her temples. She heard voices. No. One voice. Maria. Speaking softly from the kitchen. And then Emily heard something that stopped her in her tracks. A laugh. No, not a laugh. A sound. A babble. Something like a laugh. Coming from Robert. Her husband hadn't made a coherent sound in 4 years. Emily approached the kitchen door. Slowly, quietly, the door was ajar, and what she saw, it changed everything. If this story is already giving you goosebumps, give it a like, because what's coming next, it's going to break your heart. Robert Carter had been an architect, not just any architect, a brilliant one. He designed hotels, museums, buildings that seemed impossible until he drew them. Emily met him in Paris, 1992. She was studying hotel management. He was doing a master's degree in architecture. They met in a bookstore, both looking for the same book on Art Deco design. He handed her the book. She gave him her number. 6 months later, they were engaged. A year after that, they were married. Honeymoon in Napa Valley, California. Emily had never seen Robert so happy as during those 10 days in Yountville, a small town. Rolling green hills, vineyards, cobblestone streets. They ate at a small bistro. That didn't have a name, just a green door, and the smell of wood smoke. The owner served them wild boar ragu, handmade pasta, wild boar sauce cooked for 8 hours, house wine. Robert took the first bite and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was crying. Emily was alarmed. "What's wrong?" she asked, concerned. Robert smiled and took her hand. "This flavor," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this flavor is us, forever." Emily didn't understand. But she smiled back. What she didn't know was that those words would be prophetic. Because 30 years later, when Robert's mind no longer remembered her name, when his brain had erased Paris, the hotels, the buildings, his own life, his body, and still remembered that flavor, Robert and Emily returned to the States and built a life. He designed, she managed. Together, they opened a chain of 12 boutique hotels across the country. They worked hard. Traveled little. They were always busy, but they were together, and that was enough until it wasn't. Robert turned 55 and started forgetting words. Small things, names of objects, directions. Emily thought it was stress, age, but the words kept disappearing. At 56, Robert got lost driving home, a route he'd taken 1,000 times. At 57, he forgot his mother's name. At 58, a neurologist said the word Emily had been avoiding. Alzheimer's, early onset, aggressive. There is no cure, no effective treatment, only progressive deterioration until the person you knew disappears completely. Emily refused to accept it. She sought out specialists, the best doctors in America, Europe. They all said the same thing. I'm sorry. At 60, Robert stopped working. At 61, he stopped recognizing Emily as his wife. He treated her like a friend, a nurse. At 62, he stopped recognizing her at all. Now he was 62, stage 6 Alzheimer's, severe. He didn't speak. He didn't walk alone. He didn't know where he was. He spent his days sitting in a chair by the window, looking without seeing. And Emily threw herself into work, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, not because she needed the money. She had enough for 10 lifetimes, but because working was easier than being at home. Easier than watching the man she loved turn into a stranger, easier than feeling the guilt of not having traveled more, of not having closed the laptop, of not having been present when he still knew who she was. Now it was too late, or so Emily believed, until Maria Rodriguez came into her life. For the first 4 months, Maria was just an efficient housekeeper. But in month 5, something changed. Emily started noticing small details. Robert was calmer, less agitated. His gaze, though lost, seemed less empty. And that smell of home cooking that filled the house every afternoon. Emily didn't ask. She didn't have time. But one night, 2 months ago, she came home later than usual. It was almost 9 p.m. The house was silent. Maria had already left. Emily went to Robert's room. He was asleep. He seemed peaceful. On the nightstand next to his bed, there was a folded napkin. Emily picked it up. It smelled like that food, that sauce. And there was a dark brown stain. Tomato sauce, or something similar. Emily put it back and left the room. But she couldn't sleep that night, because that smell, it was still familiar. 3 weeks later, Emily came home on a Saturday morning. She had forgotten some documents. Maria was cleaning the study. Emily went upstairs for the papers, and on her way to the bathroom, she passed Maria's room. The door was ajar. Emily wasn't one of those people who snooped in their employees' rooms, but something stopped her. On Maria's nightstand, there was a book, not just any book, a cookbook, Napa Valley, traditional recipes. Emily froze. She pushed the door open, slowly. On the bed, there was a photo album. Her photo album, the one from their honeymoon. Emily went in. The album was open to a specific page. A photo of her and Robert in Yountville, 1995, outside the small bistro with the green door, smiling, young, in love. And next to the photo, there was a handwritten note. Yountville, 1995, wild boar, ragu, honeymoon, this is the flavor he loved. The handwriting was Maria's. Emily felt her legs tremble. She picked up the album, turned the pages. There were more notes. On every photo from the honeymoon, in every restaurant where they had eaten. Maria had researched. She had taken notes. She had studied. Emily left the album exactly as she had found it. She left the room, went downstairs, grabbed her documents, and left without saying a word. But that night, in her office, Emily couldn't concentrate. A housekeeper had done something that she, with all her money, hadn't thought to do: to search the past, to look for the happy moments, to find the flavor that Robert had declared forever. And to cook it, why? Robert couldn't speak. He couldn't say if he liked it. He couldn't remember anything. Why was Maria doing this? Emily needed to know. But she didn't ask. Not yet. Because a part of her was afraid of the answer. Afraid that the answer would make her feel even more guilty than she already did. If you feel this story is hitting too close to home, you're not alone. There is a pinned comment below where you can share your own story. Because we all have someone we love, and we all are afraid of losing them. 2 weeks after finding the album, Emily received a call from Dr. Eleanor Reynolds. The results of Robert's latest tests were ready. Emily went to the clinic, expecting the usual: progressive deterioration, no changes, no hope. But Dr. Reynolds had that expression, curiosity, and she showed her the graph. The spikes in brain waves, 6:47 p.m. every day. Neuronal activity that shouldn't exist in a patient with stage 6 Alzheimer's. Something is stimulating his olfactory memory, the doctor had said. And now Emily was in the hallway of her own home, 6:35 p.m. The smell of wild boar ragu filling the air, Maria's voice speaking softly when in the kitchen, and that impossible sound coming from Robert. Emily walked toward the kitchen door, slowly. Her heart was beating so hard. She could hear it. The door was ajar. Emily peeked inside, and what she saw took her breath away. Maria was standing by the stove. Her blue uniform was splattered with tomato sauce, reddish stains on her white apron, her hair pulled back in its usual braid, a few strands loose from the heat of the kitchen, yellow gloves on her hands. She was stirring a large copper pot. Steam rose in spirals, dense, aromatic. The smell was unmistakable. It wasn't just any Italian food. It was wild boar ragu. with the exact touch of rosemary, the reduced red wine, the hint of black pepper, exactly as Emily remembered it from that small bistro in Yountville, exactly as she had smelled it 30 years ago, exactly as Robert had loved it. Emily felt her legs begin to tremble. How was this possible? How did Maria know the exact recipe? How did she know about Napa Valley? How did she know about their honeymoon? But that wasn't what took her breath away. It was Robert. Her husband was sitting in his wheelchair just a few feet from the stove, and he wasn't staring into space. He was looking at Maria. His eyes, normally lost, were fixed, attentive, and his mouth was slightly open, as if he were smelling, as if he were savoring the air. Maria spoke as she cooked, softly, as always. Like in Napa Valley, Mr. Carter, remember, when you and Mrs. Carter were young, and the world was just the two of you. Robert didn't respond, but his chest rose and fell faster, as if his body were remembering something his mind couldn't reach. "The small bistro with the grapevine," continued Maria without turning around. "The chef cooked this for 8 hours. He said the secret was in the time, in the patience." Emily stood frozen in the hallway. This wasn't just cooking. This was therapy. Maria took a spoon, tasted the sauce, nodded in satisfaction. "Almost ready, Mr. Carter." Not long now. And then something happened, something small, something that shouldn't be possible. Robert raised his hand just a few inches, trembling, slowly, but he raised it, toward the smell, as if he wanted to touch it. Maria saw it, put down the spoon, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked toward him. "Smells good, doesn't it?" Her voice was so soft that Emily barely heard it. "This is the flavor you loved, the flavor you said was forever." Robert said nothing, but tears began to fall from his eyes, slowly, silently. Tears that rolled down his cheeks as he looked at Maria as if she were the most important person in the world. And Maria, without saying anything else, took a napkin and wiped away his tears, with a tenderness that Emily hadn't seen in years, with a tenderness that she herself had forgotten how to give. Emily left the house without making a sound. She got into the car, closed the door. And wept as she hadn't wept in 7 years, because a housekeeper, a woman who earned $2,000 a month, had done something that she, with all her fortune, had been unable to do. Find a way to reach Robert, not with medicine, not with doctors, not with money, but with love, with patience, with memory. Emily didn't go back into the house that night. She sent Maria a text message saying she would be late, and drove aimlessly around the city until after midnight. When she finally returned, the house was silent. Maria had left. Robert was asleep in his room. On the nightstand, there was a folded napkin. Emily picked it up. It smelled of wild boar ragu, and it had a sauce stain. The same stain she had seen 2 months ago. Emily sat on the bed next to Robert. He was breathing peacefully. His face was relaxed. He looked at peace, more at peace than he had been in years. Emily took his hand. "Forgive me," she whispered. "Forgive me for not knowing how to love you when you could no longer remember me." Robert didn't respond, but Emily stayed there, holding his hand, smelling the napkin that smelled of Napa Valley, of honeymoon, of forever. The next morning, Emily cancelled all her meetings. She called her assistant and told her she wouldn't be going to the office for the first time in 4 years. When Maria arrived at 8 a.m., Emily was waiting for her in the kitchen. Maria stopped at the door, surprised. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter." Emily said nothing for a moment. She just looked at her 48 years old, blue uniform, perfect braid, steady hands. "How long have you been cooking for him?" she finally asked. Maria lowered her gaze. 6 months, Mrs. Carter." "Why?" Maria pursed her lips, as if she didn't know if she should answer. "Because," her voice cracked slightly, "because I know what it's like to lose the love of your life." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "You lost someone?" Maria nodded. "My husband 15 years ago. Work accident. We were married for 7 years. I'm sorry." Maria raised her eyes. Her eyes were wet but firm. "Me too, Mrs. Carter. But when I lost him, he was already gone. I couldn't do anything." She paused. "But Mr. Carter is still here. His body is still breathing. His heart is still beating. And I couldn't stand by and watch you lose him while he was still alive." Emily closed her eyes. Maria's words were like a knife, because she was right. Emily had stopped fighting. She had stopped searching. She had stopped trying. Because it was easier to assume that Robert was already gone. But Maria, a woman who had no obligation, who received nothing in return, she had kept trying. "How did you find out about the recipe?" Emily asked. Maria walked to the table and sat down, slowly, as if she were tired. "I found the photo album 7 months ago. It was in the study. You had asked me to clean the bookshelves." Emily remembered. Yes, she had asked her that. "I saw the pictures of Italy," Maria continued, "and I saw one where you were outside a restaurant. You looked so happy, so complete." She paused. "On the back of the photo you had written, Montepulciano, the small bistro with the grapevine." The best day of our lives. Emily felt tears running down her cheeks. She had forgotten that note. She had forgotten that day. She had forgotten how happy they had been. I searched online, Maria said. I found the town. I found Italian food forums. I asked in cooking groups. It took me 3 months to find the exact recipe. Wild boar ragu, handmade pasta, the wild boar sauce, simmered for 8 hours. And you did it? For him? Maria nodded. At first, I just wanted to try it once, see if something would happen. And what did happen? The first day, I cooked the recipe and gave it to Robert. He didn't react. He ate as always, mechanically. But when he finished eating, he closed his eyes, and his breathing changed. He became calm, more calm than I had seen him. So I tried it again the next day, and the next. And on day 12, Maria wiped away a tear. On day 12, Robert cried. Emily brought her hands to her mouth. He didn't cry loudly. He didn't make a sound, just tears falling down his face as he ate. As if his body remembered something that his mind couldn't, and I knew. I had to keep going. That's why you cook every day at 6:47 p.m.? Maria nodded. I keep a log, Mrs. Carter, in a notebook. Day 1, day 2, day 3. I'm on day 184. Emily was silent. 184 days. More than 6 months, Maria had cooked that recipe 184 times, without anyone asking her to, without anyone paying her extra, without anyone even knowing, just because she believed it was worth it. Can I see it? Emily asked. The notebook? Maria got up and left the kitchen. She returned 2 minutes later with a small, blue notebook, worn and faded. She handed it to Emily. Emily opened it. The first page read, Recipes for Robert. Because love doesn't live in memory, it lives in the senses. Emily turned the pages. Each page had a date, a note, an observation. Day 1, cooked the recipe. Robert ate but didn't react. Day 12, he cried. First emotional reaction. Day 34, he raised his hand towards the smell, seems to recognize it. Day 47, I tried talking to him about Napa Valley while cooking. He stared at me, fixedly, as if he understood. Day 89, adjusted the recipe. The smell is now stronger, exact. Robert smiled. It was barely a second, but he smiled. Day 127. Today he said something. It wasn't clear, but it was a sound. Intentional. Day 184. Today Mrs. Carter arrived early. I don't know if she saw me, but I think it's time she knows. Emily closed the notebook. She held it tight against her chest and wept. Maria got up and placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't cry, Mrs. Carter. Robert is still here. We can still reach him. We just need to speak his language. And his language now is smell, taste, the memory of the body. Emily looked up. Teach me. Mrs. Carter, teach me to cook the recipe. I want to do it with you. Maria smiled. It would be an honor. That night, at 6 p.m., Emily and Maria cooked together. For the first time in 8 months, Emily wasn't in a meeting, wasn't answering emails, wasn't reviewing contracts. She was in her kitchen, with her hands in the dough. Learning to make pappardelle from scratch, Maria taught her patiently. Like this, knead slowly, feel the texture. It should be soft, but firm. Emily wasn't good at cooking. She never had been, but for the first time in years, she didn't care about not being good at something. All that mattered was trying. At 6:47 p.m., the pasta was ready. The smell filled the house. Emily and Maria brought Robert into the kitchen. They sat him in his chair in front of the stove, and Emily saw what Maria had seen for 184 days. Robert looked up and fixed his gaze on the pot. His breathing changed. His eyes welled up, and again. Tears began to fall. Emily knelt beside him. She took his hand. It's me, Robert. It's Emily, your wife. Robert didn't say anything, but he squeezed her hand, barely, weakly, but he squeezed it. And Emily knew. She knew Maria was right. Robert was still there, lost somewhere deep in his mind. But the smell of Napa Valley, the taste of their honeymoon, the memory engraved in his senses, that could still reach him. And if there was something that could still reach him, then there was still hope. There was still love. There was still forever. What would you do if you were Emily? Would you keep working 14 hours a day? Or would you come home? Don't answer quickly. Really think about it. Emily made a decision that night, a decision that would change everything. She called her vice president and told him she needed to reduce her hours from 14 hours to 8. Immediately. Is everything all right, Mrs. Carter? Everything is all right, Emily replied. For the first time in years, everything is all right. For the next 3 months, Emily came home every day at 5:30 p.m., half an hour before Maria started cooking, and they cooked together. Emily learned to make the pasta from scratch, to cook the sauce for 8 hours, to adjust the exact flavor. She learned to talk to Robert while cooking, as if he could understand, as if he was there. And sometimes it seemed like he was. Robert cried almost every day when he smelled the food. Sometimes he raised his hand. Sometimes he squeezed Emily's fingers. Small gestures, imperceptible to anyone else. But to Emily, they were the whole world. because they meant that her husband somehow was still fighting to stay, was still trying to remember, was still there. If this story is tearing at your heart, you're not the only one. Hit like if you believe true love never dies, not even when the mind forgets. It was day 219, 3 months after Emily started cooking with Maria. Emily arrived home at 5:30 p.m. as usual, but Maria wasn't there. There was a message on her phone. "Mrs. Carter, I'm so sorry. My sister had an emergency. I had to leave town. I'll be back tomorrow. The notebook is in the kitchen. The recipe is on page 47. You can do it alone." Emily panicked. She had never cooked the recipe alone. It had always been with Maria, always with her guidance, her patience. But she had no choice. Robert needed his food, needed his routine, needed that smell at 6:47 p.m. Emily went to the kitchen. She took the blue notebook, opened it to page 47, and began. She kneaded the pasta slowly, as Maria had taught her. She cooked the sauce 8 hours with patience, with love. And at 6:30 p.m., she brought Robert into the kitchen. She sat him in his chair in front of the stove, and for the first time in 3 months, they were alone, just Emily and Robert, like before, like always. Emily stirred the sauce. The smell filled the kitchen. And then she began to speak. "Do you remember, Robert? Do you remember Napa Valley?" Her voice trembled. "We were 28 years old. We had just gotten married. The world was ours. We walked into that unnamed small bistro in Yountville. Just a green door. And the owner served us this." She pointed to the pot, "wild boar ragu. And you took the first bite. And you cried." Emily wiped away tears. "I got scared. I thought something was wrong. But you took my hand and said," her voice broke, "This taste is us forever." Emily stopped stirring. She turned towards Robert. He was looking at her, not with the usual lost eyes, but fixed, like he was seeing her, really seeing her. "Robert." He didn't respond, but his mouth moved, slowly, tremulously. And then he said something. It was barely a whisper. So quiet Emily thought she had imagined it. But she heard it. One word. Clear. Intentional. Emily. Emily froze. Robert had just said her name, for the first time in 4 years, after 1,260 days of silence, after all the doctors said it was impossible, after Emily had lost hope. Robert had said her name. Emily fell to her knees beside him. She took his hands, pressed them against her chest. It's me, Robert. I'm here." Robert looked at her. Tears streamed down his face, and his mouth moved again. Another whisper. "Forever." Emily couldn't take it anymore. She embraced Robert, pressed her face against his shoulder, and wept. She wept for the 4 lost years, for the unspoken words, for the time they would never get back. But she also wept with gratitude, because Maria, a housekeeper who had no obligation, had found a way to bring Robert back. Not completely, maybe never completely, but enough. Enough for him to say her name, enough for him to remember forever. Enough for Emily to know that the love they had built for 30 years hadn't disappeared. It was just asleep, and the scent of Napa Valley had awakened it. That night, Emily called Dr. Eleanor Reynolds. She told her everything: the wild boar ragu, the 219 days, the tears, the notebook, and the 2 words that Robert had said. Emily, forever. Dr. Reynolds was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was filled with awe. "Mrs. Carter," she said. In 22 years of neurology, I have seen many things, but this, she paused, this is extraordinary. Is it possible? That olfactory memory has... It's more than possible, the doctor interrupted. It's exactly how the brain works with Alzheimer's. Olfactory memory is one of the last to go because it's connected directly to the emotions, to the limbic system, to the most primitive part of the brain. Robert doesn't remember your name because he learned it. He remembers it because he felt it. He felt it in that smell, in that taste, in that moment in Napa Valley 30 years ago. And his body. His body stored that deeper than any word, deeper than any face, deeper than any memory. Emily closed her eyes. Will he keep improving? The doctor sighed. I don't know. Alzheimer's doesn't stop. It doesn't cure. But what you and Maria have done, you've given him something that no medication can give. You've given him connection, presence, love. And that, Mrs. Carter, is worth more than any treatment. Emily hung up the phone, and she knew what she had to do. The next day when Maria returned, Emily was waiting for her in the living room with an envelope. Maria, Emily said, I need to talk to you. Maria sat down, nervous. Did I do something wrong, Mrs. Carter? Emily smiled. No, you did everything right. She handed her the envelope. Maria opened it. Inside was a check for $50,000. Maria gasped. Mrs. Carter, I can't accept this. It's not a gift, Emily said. It's your salary, your new salary. What? You're promoted, you're no longer a housekeeper? She paused. You're a family caregiver, official. Your salary will be $4,000 a month, plus health insurance, plus your own room in this house, if you want it. Because you're not an employee, Maria. Your family. Maria began to cry, "Mrs." "And there's something else," Emily continued. She took out her phone, opened a folder. She showed Maria a video. It was from the night before. Emily cooking alone, talking to Robert, and Robert saying her name, Emily and forever. Maria covered her mouth with her hands. "He said it. He said it." Emily nodded. "Thanks to you. Thanks to your dedication. To your love. Thanks to you not giving up when I had already given up." Maria embraced Emily, and the two women wept. One because she had lost the love of her life 15 years ago. The other because she was learning to get hers back. And both because they knew that true love never dies. It just needs someone who refuses to let it go. If you don't have tears in your eyes now, I don't know what to tell you. Like if you believe there are people who are angels on earth, and some of those angels wear blue uniforms. The next 6 months were the best Emily had had in years. She cooked with Maria every night. Robert ate his wild boar ragu. Sometimes he said words, not always clear, not always coherent, but words. Emily, love, Napa Valley. And once, on day 287, he said something that Emily would never forget. They were in the kitchen. The smell filled the house. Robert looked at her and said, "You're beautiful." Emily stopped breathing. That had been the first thing Robert had said to her when they met in Paris, 30 years ago, in a bookstore, when they were both looking for the same book. "You're beautiful." And now, 30 years later, with stage 6 Alzheimer's, with his mind destroyed, with everything lost, Robert had said it again, as if his soul remembered what his brain couldn't. Emily knelt beside him, took his face in her hands, and gave him a kiss, the first in 4 years. Robert closed his eyes. And smiled, but life is not a fairy tale, and Alzheimer's doesn't forgive. On day 342, Robert stopped talking again. The words he had recovered for 6 months were gone. Emily panicked. She called Dr. Reynolds. "It's normal," the doctor said. "Alzheimer's is progressive. There will be good days and bad days. But what you gave him in those 6 months, those moments of connection, that's more than most Alzheimer's patients have." Emily hung up the phone. And cried, but that night at 6 p.m. she went to the kitchen and cooked, because even though Robert no longer spoke, he could still smell, he could still cry, he could still squeeze her hand, and that was enough. That was love. Not the love from the movies, not the perfect love, but real love. The love that stays when everything else is gone. The love that cooks the same recipe 342 times because it believes it's worth it. The love that expects nothing in return. The love that simply is there. Day 400. Robert still wasn't talking. But he was still crying when he smelled the wild boar ragout, still squeezing Emily's hand, still looking at her with those eyes that, although lost, still had flashes of recognition, and Emily was still cooking every day. At 6:47 p.m., the way Maria had taught her, the way Robert deserved, the way love demanded, and then, on day 478, something changed. Emily was cooking as always. Maria was next to her, helping with the sauce. Robert was sitting in his chair, observing. The smell filled the kitchen, and Robert, without warning, began to hum. It wasn't a song. It wasn't a recognizable melody. It was just a sound, a happy sound. Emily and Maria stopped. They looked at each other and smiled, because even though Robert couldn't talk, even though he couldn't remember, even though he couldn't be who he had been, his body still knew how to be happy, and that smell, that taste, that memory buried deep within his senses, that still brought him joy. That was the day Emily knew that she had made the right decision. That coming home, cutting back on work, cooking every night, that wasn't going to cure Robert. It wasn't going to bring back his memory. It wasn't going to bring him back completely. But it was going to give him something more important. It was going to give him presence. It was going to give him love. It was going to give him dignity. And that was all that mattered. That night, after dinner, Emily and Maria sat in the living room. Robert was asleep, peaceful, smiling. Emily looked at Maria. "I want to do something," she said. "What, Mrs. Carter?" "I want other families to know what you did, what you discovered. I want to create a program." A foundation to teach caregivers of Alzheimer's patients about olfactory memory, about how to use food, smells, tastes to connect with their loved ones. Maria was silent. "You would do that?" Emily nodded. "You taught me that love doesn't live in memory, it lives in the senses. And there are millions of families losing their loved ones every day. Families who believe that there's nothing left to do. But you proved that there is something." She paused. "And I want the world to know it." Maria began to cry. "It would be an honor, Mrs. Carter." 3 months later, Emily launched the Olfactory Memories Foundation. The concept was simple. Teach families of Alzheimer's patients to identify happy moments from the past, weddings, honeymoons, birthdays, parties, and recreate the smells, the tastes, the foods of those moments, not to cure the disease, but to create connection. to give patients something that their minds couldn't process, but their bodies could. The pilot program began in 5 hospitals. Maria was the lead trainer. She taught caregivers, nurses, families. She showed them the blue notebook, the 478 days, the notes. She told them about Robert, about the tears, about the 2 words, Emily, forever. And something incredible happened. It worked. Not in every case. Alzheimer's is unpredictable, but in many, enough to prove that Maria had discovered something real, something that science was starting to validate. A woman in Scottsdale called the foundation crying. Her name was Jessica, 52 years old. Her mother, Beverly, had been living with vascular dementia for 3 years. She hadn't spoken in 2 years. The doctors said her brain was too damaged, that she would never communicate again. But Jessica remembered something. When she was a child, her mother made apple pie every Thanksgiving, a special recipe from her grandmother, with cinnamon, nutmeg, and a perfect crust. And her mother sang while she baked, always the same song. You Are My Sunshine. Jessica found the recipe. It took 3 tries, 9 hours of baking, but on the 10th try, the smell was exact. She wheeled her mother into the kitchen in her wheelchair, put the pie in front of her, and waited. Beverly didn't react at first, but then, slowly, her face changed, her lips moved, and she began to sing, You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Barely a whisper, broken, off-key, but it was, You are my sunshine. The song she had sung 1,000 times while baking apple pie, the song that her brain didn't remember, but her body did. Jessica called the foundation that night. Thank you, she said through tears. Thank you for giving me back my mother, even if it's just for 3 minutes. Three minutes were worth more than 3 years of silence. A man in San Francisco wrote a long email. His name was Kevin, 45 years old, an engineer. His father, Mr. Thompson, had stage 5 Alzheimer's. He hadn't recognized anyone for 18 months. Kevin had tried everything, medications, therapies, music, nothing worked. But then he remembered the clam chowder. His grandmother made clam chowder for every Christmas Eve dinner, a recipe with potatoes, clams, and a secret blend of spices, and his father always said that clam chowder was the taste of family. Kevin had never cooked clam chowder in his life, but he spent an entire week learning. He burned the first batch, the second was too salty, the third was too bland, but the fourth was perfect. He brought his father into the kitchen, gave him a spoonful. Mr. Thompson chewed slowly, and then he squeezed Kevin's hand, hard, intentional, and cried. He didn't say anything, he couldn't. But those tears, that handshake, Kevin understood. His father was there, lost somewhere deep in his mind. But the taste of his grandmother's clam chowder had reached him. And for a moment, father and son were connected again. Not with words, but with something deeper. With the memory of the body. With love that lived in the senses. Kevin ended his email saying, "You gave me back my father. Not completely, but enough." Enough for him to know that I'm still here, and that he is too. Stories like those began to arrive. Dozens, hundreds, families who had lost hope and now had something. Not a miracle, not a cure, but a bridge. A bridge between the past and the present, between memory and oblivion, between love and loss. 1 year after the launch, the Olfactory Memories Foundation had trained 340 caregivers, had sent personalized recipes to over 500 families. She had created a protocol that was now being studied at universities. And Dr. Eleanor Reynolds, the neurologist who had seen the spikes in Robert's brainwaves, was now a medical advisor for the foundation. "This story shouldn't exist," the doctor said at a neurology conference. "According to everything we know about Alzheimer's, what Maria did should not work. But it does, because love finds ways that science cannot explain." Emily was in the audience, and she wept, because that was exactly what Maria had demonstrated. That love, real love, stubborn love that refuses to give up, that love can make the impossible possible. 2 years after the day Dr. Reynolds showed her the brainwave chart, Emily was in the kitchen. It was day 730. 2 full years of cooking wild boar ragu. Robert was in his chair, as always. He no longer spoke. He no longer squeezed hands. The stage 6 Alzheimer's had progressed, but he still cried when he smelled the food. He still looked at Emily with those eyes that, although lost, still held something. Recognition, love, memory of the body. Emily placed the plate in front of him, and something extraordinary happened. Robert raised his hand, slowly, tremulously, and touched Emily's face. He didn't say a word, but his fingers caressed her cheek like he used to do. "30 years ago, when they were young, and the world was just them," Emily took his hand, pressed it against her face, and whispered, "Forever, Robert, forever." That night, Maria found Emily in the garden. Emily was crying, but not from sadness, from gratitude. "Thank you," she told Maria. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see. Thank you for believing it was worth it." Maria sat down next to her. I didn't do anything special, Mrs. Carter. I just loved, that's all I did. Emily shook her head. Loving when it's easy is no merit. Loving when it seems impossible, that is special. And you taught me how to do it. The two women sat in silence, looking at the stars, thinking about Robert, about love, about memory, about everything that Alzheimer's could not steal. Robert Carter passed away on day 892, 2.5 years. After Maria started cooking for him, it was a Tuesday afternoon. The sky was grey, threatening rain, but it didn't rain, as if the world was waiting along with them. Robert had stopped eating 3 days ago. His body was tired, too tired. The doctors had said it was a matter of hours, maybe a day. Emily didn't move from his side. Maria didn't either. At 5 p.m., Maria went to the kitchen. Emily stopped her. You don't have to do it today. She said softly. Maria looked at her. Her eyes were red, but firm. Yes, I do have to do it, Mrs. Carter, more than ever. Because if today is the last day, then let the last smell that Mr. Carter smells be the smell of love, the smell of you two young in Napa Valley when the world was just yours. Emily couldn't respond. She just nodded, and Maria went to the kitchen for the last time. At 6:47 p.m., the smell of wild boar ragu filled the house, as it had filled the house for 892 days. Emily was sitting next to Robert, holding his hand. His breathing was shallow, irregular. But when the smell reached the room, something changed. Robert inhaled deeply, deeper than he had breathed in days, as if his body was taking one last photograph, not with the eyes, but with the sense of smell. Emily leaned down to him. She spoke into his ear. It's me, Robert. It's Emily, your wife. The love of your life. We're in Napa Valley, my love, at that small bistro in Yuntville with the green door. We just got married. The world is ours, and the owner is serving us ragu, the same one that you said was yours forever. Emily's voice cracked. And you were right, Robert. It was forever. Because here we are, 30 years later, and the taste still unites us. Maria slowly entered the room. She was carrying a small plate. With a little sauce, she handed it to Emily. Emily dipped her finger in the sauce, and carefully, with so much love that it hurt, she put a little on Robert's lips. Robert didn't open his eyes. He didn't say anything, but his lips moved. Barely, as if he were savoring, as if he were remembering, and then he smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't obvious. It was barely a curve at the corners of his lips, imperceptible to anyone. who hadn't spent 30 years loving him, but Emily saw it, and she knew that Robert, in that final moment, in that last breath, was still there, not lost in Alzheimer's, not trapped in oblivion, but back in Napa Valley, back in the bistro, back with her, young, in love, happy. She knew that the taste had brought him back, to where it all began, to where everything was perfect, to forever. Robert exhaled, slowly, softly. And didn't inhale again. He left with that smile, with the taste of ragu on his lips, with the smell of Napa Valley in the air, with Emily holding his hand, and with Maria, standing in the doorway, crying silently, because she knew that she had done the only thing that mattered. She had given Robert one last moment of happiness, one last memory, one last forever. Robert's funeral was small. Emily didn't want something big, didn't want a show. Just family, close friends, and Maria. Maria, who was no longer an employee, but family. Maria, who had done more for Robert than any doctor. Maria, who had proven that miracles don't come from expensive hospitals, but from hands willing to love unconditionally. During the service, Emily spoke. "My husband," she said, "was a great architect. He designed buildings that seemed impossible. But the most important structure that he built wasn't a building, it was love. A love so strong that it survived Alzheimer's. A love so deep that it lived in places where memory couldn't die. In the smell, in the taste, in the touch. And that love was preserved by a woman who had no obligation to do so. Emily looked at Maria. "Thank you, Maria, for being the angel that my husband needed, and the angel that I didn't know I needed too," Maria cried. And everyone present cried with her, because they knew that they had witnessed something rare, something that money cannot buy, something that medicine cannot prescribe: true love. Today, 3 years after Robert's passing, the Olfactory Memories Foundation continues to flourish. It has trained over 1,200 caregivers. It has provided support to more than 2,000 families. It operates programs in 15 cities across the United States. And it is expanding into Canada, the UK, and Australia. Maria is now the director of training. She travels the country, teaching her method, the method she discovered cooking in a kitchen for a man who could no longer recall his own name, the method that saved Emily from losing Robert before his body had even given up. Emily has scaled back her work to part-time. She appointed a co-CEO to oversee the hotels, and now she dedicates the other half of her time. to the foundation, not out of obligation, but because she discovered her purpose, helping other families avoid the mistake she almost made. The mistake of giving up too soon. The mistake of assuming there's nothing more that can be done. The mistake of forgetting that love always finds a way. In Emily's office hangs a photo of her and Robert in Napa Valley back in 1995. Outside that small bistro with the green door in Yountville, young, smiling. Deeply in love. And beneath the photo is a plaque. It reads, "This taste is us, forever." Robert Carter, 1965-2027. Love doesn't live in memory. It lives in the senses. Every time Emily looks at that photo, she smiles, because she knows that Robert was right. The taste of that day in Napa Valley truly was forever. Not because he remembered it, but because his body never forgot. And thanks to Maria, thanks to her dedication, thanks to her unwavering love. Emily got 2 more years with her husband, not 2 perfect years, not 2 years like before, but 2 years of connection. 2 years of presence, 2 years filled with love, and that was worth more than anything money could ever buy. Some people might argue that this story is sad, that Robert died, that Alzheimer's ultimately won, but Emily doesn't see it that way. She sees a story of hope, a story of a woman who refused to give up. A story of a love that found a way to survive, even when the mind had forgotten. And a story that is now helping thousands of families avoid losing their loved ones while they're still alive. Because that's the truth about Alzheimer's. You can't stop it, you can't cure it, but you can choose how you face it. You can choose to surrender, or you can choose to seek in the past, in the joyful moments, in the forgotten flavors. And when you find that taste, that scent, that memory buried deep within the senses, you find a little piece of the person you love, a little piece that the disease could not steal. And that little piece, however small it may be, is worth everything, worth every effort, every tear, every day spent cooking the same recipe, because in the end, love isn't about remembering, it's about being there. It's about never giving up. It's about believing that there's always a way. And thanks to Maria Rodriguez, a housekeeper who was just earning minimum wage, Emily learned that, and now thousands of families are learning it too. You have 2 choices now. You can close this video and forget you ever saw it. Or you can remember that true love doesn't reside in memory. It lives in the senses, in the smells, in the flavors, in the places that the disease cannot reach. And if you have someone in your life with Alzheimer's, with dementia, With any illness that steals the mind, don't give up. Seek out that taste, that smell, that memory, because your loved one is still there. You just need to speak their language, and their language now is the heart, not the head. This story is real. The names have been changed to protect their privacy, but the Olfactory Memories Foundation exists, and it's helping families every single day. If you want to learn more, look them up. If this story touched you, in any way, just please share it, because there are millions of families losing their loved ones right now, and they need to know that there's still hope, there's still love, there's still forever. Recipe by recipe, scent by scent, tear by tear, love finds a way. It always does.